My friends, as we come together in profound silence, as we each come to remember our beloved Ben and to give thanks for his life, his love, his care of us, we come together in sorrow and yet also in thanksgiving, and thanks for his 90 years with us, years filled with such quality and hope. And we begin with ancient words, the words of Psalms, Psalms which I believe were possibly written at a time such as this, when the author or authors were feeling sorrow and sadness. I think that the author of Psalm 121 might have been feeling this way, looked up to the hills of Jerusalem and said these words, I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm and will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. I would invite those who wish to join me in the words of the 23rd Psalm. You can find the words on the handouts that you received when you came in. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. God, as we gather today to honor the life and memory of Dr. Benjamin Borowsky, we understand that death has come to him as it does to all persons. This moment brings to our hearts and minds the shared destiny of all humankind. We are drawn together by the deep-felt emotions of sorrow and loss, of memory and love. Our lives are rooted in a profound mystery past our understanding. In the face of eternity, we are made simple. Though we know our destiny is to tarry but a while, the time of separation brings anguish and grief. May we bear our burden bravely, struggling through the darkness with courage to find our way again. Out of your goodness, we received our beloved Ben, whose end has now come. We shared blessings with him in great and generous measure. From the depths of our hearts, we are grateful for the years of life and joy, his love answering to ours, his companionship responding to ours, brought warmth and gladness to our days. We cherish that love and companionship though he be gone, and will always keep his memory in the treasure house of our minds. We seek strength to go our way and to do our tasks day by day. May his memory live on in us to inspire service and kindness, and thus endure for blessing. We bless you, the source of life, fountain of being, whose power existence flows and ebbs. come together to honor the memory of our Ben, our dear one, our physician, our colleague, our friend. We knew him as such a fine gentleman, a man of the highest standards and the deepest love for family and dear ones. He was a physician, a devoted physician, but he was more. He was a true mensch who treated each of us with respect, kindness, and sincerity. From the time we first met back in the 1960s, I always looked up to him, not only physically, but as a deeply learned man whose interests were so wide-ranging, who was so well-read in many disciplines, and who shared in conversations, always seeking to understand what the other person was thinking as well as himself. I know that family always came first to him. He grew up in the small town of Manila, Arkansas, and revered his parents. I remember his parents speaking with such pride about all of their children. He was a loving brother to you, Fruma, Les, to his late Coleman, and all of your extended families. His deepest love for his redeemed, his bride of 67 years, sustained him throughout his life and enriched those wonderful retirement years together. His sons were a very special blessing to him. Whenever we talked, he always talked about you, your devotion, the devotion of your families, and your love. He adored his daughters-in-law, worshiped his grandchildren. But no one can tell that story better than his own dear ones. And so his sons, Steve, Larry, and Mark, will share memories with us now.
So I'm Steve, and I want to thank all of you for being here today to help remember my father and to support our family. The outpouring of love has been overwhelming and means so much to us. This may be tough for me to get through, so you'll have to bear with me if it gets a little rocky. So I'll start with what was most important in Ben's life, as the rabbi said, and that was his family. He was the ultimate family man. He was a devoted son to his parents who raised him in the legendary small Arkansas town of Manila. He grew up there with his siblings Coleman, Fruma, and Les, whom he loved very much. I think they shared a strong bond of surviving Manila. It means so much to us that Uncle Les and Aunt Fruma are here with us today. As a father to 3 young boys, Ben was ever present, uber dependable, and always there for us, like the sun rising every day. We had a lot of fun together as a family growing up, going on canoe trips on Missouri rivers, learning how to throw, catch, and hit a baseball in the backyard, riding bikes, and traveling to Manila for Passover every year. Inevitably, there would be some occasional low-grade mischief, to which Ben liked to say with a moderate degree of sternness, "I don't care who started it, I'm stopping it." And that was usually pretty effective. Along the way, there were amazing trips to California, to Colorado, and rafting on the Green River in Utah with Uncle Les. Ben and I biked together in Utah in 2002, and he was in awe of the splendors of nature, including Bryce and Zion National Parks. And then there was Cardinals baseball, another of Ben's lifelong passions that became fully integrated into our family life. Ben loved to recall seeing Stan Musial play at Sportsman Park. He attended the game at which Bob Gibson set the single-game World Series strikeout record in 1968. And just the other day, he told me how Gibson struck out the side to end that game and set the record. And it still thrilled him. 3 years later, on a summer night, we were in our backyard listening to Dad's old transistor radio as Jack Buck called the game, and Gibson pitched his only no-hitter that night. And it was another great memory for all of us. Ben made sure we were at the game when Lou Brock broke the single-season stolen base record at Busch. Ben had never been to the Baseball Hall of Fame until he and my brothers and I went to Cooperstown in 2016, and that was a thrill we shared as well. The Cardinals play the Minnesota Twins tomorrow night in Minneapolis, where Iris and I have lived for 30 years. And I'll be rooting for the Cardinals, as I always do, and I'll be thinking about my dad with every pitch. My father's loving presence in our lives continued throughout our adult lives. When he became a father-in-law 3 times over, he developed close and loving relationships with Iris, Layla, and Heidi. There have been important times in my adult life when I really needed him, and he was there for me. Most people wouldn't describe Ben as touchy-feely or overly expressive of his emotions, but in the last few years, he started getting the hang of that, telling us frequently that he loved us, which we knew anyway. I know I will always feel the warmth and strength of my father, which has been and will always be a bedrock for me. So I still have not mentioned the most important person in my father's life, and I'm not talking about a baseball player. It was obviously Ben's wife of 67 years, my mom, Ray Dean. Mom, Dad loved you so deeply. There was no doubt you were everything to him and the love of his life. Despite all his interests and passions, all he really needed was you. He was content just being with you. You made an amazing team and complemented each other beautifully. He was damn lucky he found you, and I know he felt that. He felt the same way, or I know you felt the same way about him. And his role models in marriage, you and Dad have taught us so much, as you did when you stole the show at Hannah and Chris's wedding with your tutorial on marriage. Dad wanted to be sure we would be there for you after he was gone, and I hope you know that of course we are and always will be. Finally, as far as family goes, being a grandfather was such a joy for him. All 6 of Grandpa's grandkids are here today. Actually, bonus grandchild Chris makes it 7. He was incredibly proud of each of you, saw each of your strengths, and had complete confidence in your abilities. He loved you all so much, and I know you will carry him in your hearts. Everyone knows Ben was a physician, and it seems everyone was his patient. Being a physician was central to my father's being and his life's calling. His approach to medicine was deeply rooted in science. Just after his residency, he spent time at the NIH, where his responsibilities included caring for very ill cancer patients in clinical trials for the earliest chemotherapeutic drugs. Throughout his life, he was interested in biological sciences, including his fascination with genetics. As a physician in the community here, he was a doctor's doctor. He was a consummate professional who always placed his patient's interests above his own, or above all else. And just 2 weeks ago, the young physician who admitted him to the hospital asked Ben what advice he would give him. And to this, Ben said, "Put your patients first." So he was teaching to the end, and he loved over his many years teaching the residents and medical students at Washington U. And he had deep respect and gratitude, as do we, his family, for the physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals who cared for him throughout his life and during the more medically complicated recent years. And of course, he is the reason I became a physician. As a child, I could see his work was deeply purposeful and meaningful to him, and that drew me in. I witnessed how he embraced without complaint the hard work, including early morning rounds, late nights, and work on weekends. On top of this, he volunteered at times at a clinic for low-income individuals, reflecting his belief in healthcare equity and the right to care for all individuals, regardless of their ability to pay. As a young child, it was thrilling for me when he took me on rounds with him in the hospital, where I saw him practice his craft, and I'll always be grateful to him for sharing this great profession with me. And his devotion to caring for others has influenced additional generations, meaning his grandchildren. He was so excited and interested in Hannah and Chris's careers in medicine and Naomi's in social work, and he knew all of his grandchildren embraced his caring for humanity in their own ways. Okay, just the last few thoughts. I have to mention that Ben could be a little bit stubborn. He would walk with his cane, but not actually use his cane. He would just carry it, as if to troll us and say, "See, I don't need this cane." And in fact, somehow, miraculously, he didn't fall, at least not recently. He broke many more bones falling off of his bicycle earlier in his life than he did lately. But other than a bit of stubbornness, they're really only good things to say about my father. He modeled ways of living and being in this world that I will always aspire to. His honesty and integrity, his basic decency towards others, and deep belief in human equality, his great equanimity that allowed him to hold worry at bay and say about most things, what good would it do to worry anyway? And finally, his humility. He'd want to know why we're making a fuss over him today. So these are the greatest lessons he taught us, and for which I'll always be grateful.
Hi, I'm Mark, Ben's youngest son, and I'll try to repeat only a few of the highlights that Steve touched on. And I've found myself reflecting in recent days over my dad's life and our interactions. And I wanted to just speak about three of the qualities of his that are really defining strengths for me. First of all, his patience. His incredible patience in all respects, never more on display than really in the past few years, as he was himself a patient, facing the medical system that he practiced in for so many years and enduring all of the trials and tribulations that anyone who's ever been sick has been through. But his patience, of course, was a lifelong quality, a really integral to his being. You could see it in his methodical approach to his beloved weekly New York Times spelling bee or the daily Wordle. You could see it in his parenting. Indeed, to have raised the three of us must have required immense patience, and in his approach to his grandchildren over the years. And as Steve, I think, spoke to beautifully, his passion for teaching and his ability to patiently impart information to others in a way that made it possible for them to understand it, no matter how many times he had to tell me. But And his patience also came through just in the way he tried to understand the world around him, which he knew he couldn't necessarily take in all at once, but which he was always taking in and seeking. And that was really, very much his second defining quality that I've reflected on, which is his curiosity. Really an abiding curiosity about just about everything: history, music, art. He was interested in people's decisions and the reasons behind them, perhaps none more so than decisions made by the St. Louis Cardinals management. And he was just interested in just about how anything came to be the way it is. And of course, the thing he was most curious about was his curiosity about human health and human disease and how one could treat it. And that, of course, was really linked to his broader interest in science, which is the third aspect of his life, which Steve also, I think, addressed nicely. And that's a natural target for someone with the kind of curiosity that my dad had. And it's an interest that requires tremendous patience. So it was a natural fit with, I think, his other defining attributes. And of course, it's an interest that goes hand in hand with his skill as a teacher. It spanned his life, it was part of his career, it touched his family in many ways, and of course it's an interest that he imparted to me. I was thinking back, and I think it was probably in 6th grade when he came to my classroom at Reed School, which sits across the street from where he'll be buried today. And he came in and spoke to my class to explain what diabetes is. And for me, that was opened up this whole new world. What was insulin? And then, of course, in typical fashion, over dinner that night, we talked about it at length, probably much to my mother's tedium. And that led us to open a book somewhere, because back then you had to open a book to find things. And he showed me the structure of insulin, and that led me to discover the structure of proteins and what were amino acids. And well, that was, looking back, probably the seed that sprouted some years later into my own career in science, which of course brought all of his qualities of curiosity and patience and science together. And it's no surprise that you find biologists and chemists and biophysicists and medical informaticians and clinicians among his children and grandchildren. His passion for science has permeated the generations. But above all, these are qualities that I always think of and make me, so fond of my father. But above all, it was really his loving, caring parent role and grandparent, and as Steve, I think, so beautifully described, his absolute devotion to our mother. That was certainly the most important aspect of him. And he was indeed a role model for me, and still is and will be, for how to be a good partner, I hope, Layla. And we often speak about how we think of both of you, Mom and Dad, as role models for the kind of relationship we want to have. So I would say, if I summed it up, he was the kind of dad who met you where you were, and I think the kind of grandfather who met you where you were, and I would imagine to his friends perhaps the same. When I was a little kid, when he started riding his bike regularly, I was probably about 6 years old, and he would take a ride with me. I was desperate to go on his weekend rides with him because it was the coolest thing. And so he would take me on his weekend ride, and I thought that was his weekend ride, but of course eventually I learned that the 15-minute ride that we took to the end of the street and back was the appetizer, and after he dropped me off, he went for a real bike ride. But he never let me know that, right? Or at least, not when it would have mattered to me. And as I graduated to some of the distances that I could keep up, it was still, he still had conveniently needed to stop and rest at the top of the biggest hills while I caught up. And just so happened that he was tired then. And it's that kind of person that he was. he was interested in your interests, whether he was really ever, interested in them or not. I'm sure he never imagined how many model rockets that he would see launched in his life. And it was just that ability to be with you where you were and to make you feel special and cared about that perhaps most important to me. So look, that made him an easy person to love, and it will be hard to miss him for those reasons. And Dad, I love you a lot, and I'll miss you.
My name's Larry. I am the third of the three sons, the middle son, the one who got Ben's DNA for height. So, as Mark pointed out, it's not a surprise that there are scientists and doctors and physicists and so forth among his children and grandchildren. It's also not a surprise that there are great sports fans. And I think that is since I'm not a scientist, my big point of connection with my dad, among many, but the thing that we, I think, shared a love for in equal measure was sports, and in particular the Cardinals. And I asked myself, can I really get up at his funeral and just talk about baseball? Would he want me to do that? And then I kind of felt like when would he not want to talk about baseball? He would always want to do that. And so I'm going to use baseball to talk about other non-baseball aspects of my dad's life and his parenting that are so admirable and made such a big impact on me and on many other people. Everyone's talked about what a great teacher that our dad was, and he taught all of us how to keep score at the baseball game. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I guess I should also add, again, to excuse myself for talking about such a trivial thing as the Cardinals, it was where my dad took my mom on their first date. And that was a blind date, and he asked her, would you like to go to a Cardinals game? Do you like baseball? And she's like, oh, I love baseball. Absolutely. There's nothing I would rather do. I'm so glad that that's what you want to do. So we kept score at the game. We would all get our own scorecard. We would all get our own pencil, and we would sit in section 158, and we'd all keep our own scorecard. And I've thought about the way that reflects how my dad's mind worked in a lot of ways, that it's a discipline. It's a matter of closely observing what's happening in front of you. It's helping you understand what's happening in front of you while it's happening. It's directing your attention to details which may or may not be meaningful, but you're still recording those things, and maybe later on finding out that those small details might have had a big implication. So it's a way of appreciating this experience while it's going on, in a really deeply engaged way. And if you score enough baseball games, you might start to be able to make an educated guess about what might be happening an inning or two down the line, or in a game or two down the line. It can help you sort of anticipate and maybe be prepared for future events. I have one anecdote in that regard to talk about. It was one of my very favorite memories of Dad related to baseball. We were at a playoff game. I think that I was the only one there among the three boys. And it was late in the game. It was a tie game, very tense. And the first batter in like the 8th inning came up for the Cardinals and hit one that looked like it'd be a home run, and then it just fell short. And the next batter came up, and Dad looked at his scorecard, and he noticed that this hitter had a couple of very deep fly balls that were caught deep in the outfield, and he'd also had one that went foul that was home run distance. So he says to me, I think this guy's going deep here. And, that was a very uncharacteristic thing for him to say during a game. It was a very unscientific thing for him to say. It was kind of like a hunch. And I said, are you sure? And he said, this pitch. So when the guy hit it out on that pitch, of course, he could not have been more pleased with himself. And I think he was also a little bit shocked and stunned, and I think he maybe was a touch embarrassed because he had broken this sort of discipline of being very factual, and and he got away with it that time. And but I actually think back on that a lot, and I think that it wasn't just luck. There was certainly some luck, but I think it's also a byproduct of what happens when you do pay close attention and you absorb the details, and the information piles up, and you internalize it, and you maybe have a deeper level of understanding even than that you are conscious of. And at any rate, I feel like that this is an operating principle for how he practiced medicine, how he raised a family, how he formed political opinions or interacted with the world at large, which is you're not always going to get the right answer, and there might not even be a right answer, but there's a right process for looking for an answer, and that process involves you follow that process with integrity. So you pay attention to the details, you record what's happening, and you minimize, not only do you maximize your chances of getting the right answer or maybe stumbling your way to the right answer after a few false starts, above all, you're going to avoid making a completely dumb decision that makes everything worse. I think that mental discipline that I'm using scorekeeping as a metaphor for was reflected in his demeanor. He was very calm and steady all the time. He never seemed anxious. He just kept paying attention and recording details and working his way toward a deeper understanding. And I think he felt like that as long as he did that, everything was going to work out okay. I never saw him really torn by self-doubt. I think that Mom, maybe there were times where a little self-doubt might have actually been good for Dad, just a touch. But I think that his self-assurance was reassuring to other people. I think he exuded a sense of confidence, and he had trust in how he viewed the world, and I think other people trusted him in large part for those reasons. And then the other thing is accountability. Steve and Mark both talked about how dependable my dad was, how much you could rely on him, how consistent he was. He was the same person every day. And that also inspired trust. It made people feel like that they could depend on him. He was sort of the rock. And so one illustration of that was how when we were kids and we'd go to the game, Mom would drive us down to his office. And sometimes she would come with us to the game, and sometimes she would just dump us off there. And that way he didn't have to come back home, before he left the office, but when she took us there, he was always at his desk, and he was returning all the messages he'd gotten during that day, or he was like looking at the labs that had come in from patients of his that were at the hospital, and then he was relaying notes. This is 2 hours after his office had closed, and he's still there making sure that he is wrapping up every loose end, making sure, as Steve said, he's putting his patients first, and that's just that dedication, really sticks with me. So then he'd make his last call, we'll go downtown, we'd buy our scorecards and our pencils, and we'd watch the game. So, Dad, and there is a game going on right now. Mark and I were wondering if Dad were attending this service, if he might have stolen a look at his phone to see what the score was. But I just want to thank Dad for teaching me how to keep score and how to live a meaningful life. Take all of my respect and admiration with you. Know that everything you've taught me and all of us will be carried forward and will continue to be taught and preserved and passed down. I love you very much.
We thank you for those memories. I'm sure he would say that each of his sons hit a home run this afternoon. You said a lot of the things that I was going to say, so I'll just speak as his friend and one of his rabbis. We always looked up to Ben and Radine. He told me that you were his pillar of strength when he had long days and tiring weeks. And he marveled at your ability to soothe and comfort and help him recuperate. We often would see each other, especially at the opera, sometimes the symphony and the rep. And especially during the operas at times, some of which were great and some of which were not so great, I loved his take because he was good and he knew about it. And we have our opera expert here, Doctor. But he really understood not only the story, but the background and could analyze the characters. Together, you supported so many important cultural institutions in town. We all loved him for who he was. I think the words that you told me yesterday deserve repeating. Radine told me that at one of the special parties, she said, "All that glitters is not gold, and all that is gold does not glitter." And Ben was pure gold with no need for glitter. He was, in many ways, a simple man and didn't ask much. He took the world conditions seriously. He was really well-read, would discuss the books that meant so much to him, and he believed in trying to make the world better. We call it tikkun olam in the Jewish tradition. I remember when we volunteered together for a group called Missouri Cures, which was fighting the ban on stem cell research. And he came to our temple, Sheremet, his temple, and came and spoke on the importance of stem cell research to one of our adult groups. And his effort to sustain progressive values never wavered. And I have to tell you, I'm not going to make believe that Ben was a regular attender at temple, But when you came, especially on the high holy days, if he had some thoughts on my sermons way back when, they were insightful, mostly agreed with me, which I agreed with him, but often, sometimes suggesting other ways that I could have said things or different ideas. And I love that, because that's a real friend. As was said, he loved teaching, and many people told me of his, recently told me of his course in genetics at the Lifelong Learning Institute. He had so many friends throughout the years at his age, so many of whom are gone already, but we all felt that he treated each of us with respect and courtesy. He did not look down upon us and was always there for whatever we needed, to share a good word, a gentle laugh. And I know that his colleagues, physicians, nurses, and others in the medical field held him in deepest respect. He enjoyed the play reading club, which you shared for many decades. As his children have said, Ben and Radine had a busy social schedule up until just these last years of illness. The world was open, and you both embraced it and cared for it. And as was said, his thoughtfulness lasted until his last days. Even though he hated to leave your condo, he agreed to move to the Gatesworth so that you, Radine, would be comfortable if something happened to him, and his thoughtfulness still endures. So much illness and many tests weakened him during these last years, yet his family says he was so courageous and stoic. He did not complain even when weak and in pain. He who had helped so many to heal found himself on the other side. Yet this did not diminish his kindness. He got to know his caregivers in the hospital, thanked them, showed his appreciation for their hard work, and could even bring a smile to their faces. He was a mensch to the very end. As was mentioned, he enjoyed his trips with his family, by bike, by car, by plane. A deep and permanent bond, we have heard, was created by those times together. He was so grateful that that bond endured and deepened through the generations, and deepened especially in these last years when you, his dear ones, were here so often to be with him and offer him strength. Now his travels are over and he is free of pain. But as we continue traveling along the path of life, may we, his family and friends, continue to live the lessons that he taught to us. May we appreciate life and its blessings. May we be aware of the beauty around us and add to it. May we share our love for family and friends and always move towards making this world a little better. May we always be grateful for having known and loved Ben, and may his rest be peace. Amen. In this spirit, I would ask those who are able to please rise for the words of the El Molei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Molei Rachamim, Shochein B'Maromim, Amtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kadoshim Utahorim, Kazohar Harakia Masirim, Et Nishmat Benjamin Ben Ze'ev Wolf, Vapaya Shahalach La'olamo, Baal harachamim yastirehu b'seiter kanafav la'olamim. V'yitzor b'yitzrachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'nuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our loved one, Dr. Benjamin Arthur Borowsky, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. You are his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We shall conclude our ceremony at the Beit HaMedrash HaGadol Cemetery on Ladue Road. Those who wish to accompany us to the cemetery are invited to do so in procession. The family will be receiving visitors this afternoon from 3:30 until 6 at the Colonnade Room at the Gatesworth 1 McKnight Place. And Ben's name will be lovingly remembered at Sabbath services, Shabbat services, on Friday evenings at 5 p.m. for the next 4 Shabbatot.